So we're sort of no further down the track when our political leaders are so spineless and weak-kneed. And yeah, I mean, congratulations to your Prime Minister who finally figured it out, but he needed a Supreme Court to tell him what the answer was. I mean, if my message to families is if we can't trust politicians on basic biological reality, why would we trust them with any other decision?
Bob McCorsky, I'm really happy to talk to you at whatever time it is in New Zealand, the other side of the world. Astonishing to hear your voice. Chief Executive and founder of Family First New Zealand. Tell us how that came about.
Well, good to be on your show. I actually do watch it quite a bit, see your emails come through, so it's nice to meet you in person. Family First was formed just over 19 years ago, and really it came because I was involved in the media. I was in a Christian nationwide talkback show, and I always found it easy to find people on the liberal side, the left side, the woke side to interview. They were always available, but trying to find some good common sense conservative voices used to be very difficult. And I always found that a bit of a dilemma and really thought, hey, we need more voices to speak up, unapologetically conservative. And so we set up Family First to be a voice in a number of social issues that were going on in New Zealand. At the time, we just decriminalised prostitution. There was the Civil Unions Bill. There was a bill to ban smacking, so to criminalise parents for giving their wayward child a smack on the backside or on the hand. And so there was a whole lot of issues that we needed to speak into, and so that's sort of how it started.
Great. Now I know of Jacinda, of course, your Prime Minister around COVID and all the things that happened in New Zealand around that time. I also know that you pinch many of our best doctors because it's such a nice place to live, and you have a rugby team that does a very strange dance and those sorts of things. But actually, as well as all that, you're dealing with some of the very same issues that we're dealing with over here, and in the same kind of time frame, interestingly enough. Organisationally, you're actually very similar too. I mean, first of all, we have supporters from all faiths and none. I happen to be a Christian myself, like you. But our supporters come from all different backgrounds, and we coalesce just around the issue of marriage. You, of course, are even wider than that. But looking back at the timeline of the way things happen, we seem to be following the same trajectory, kind of in the Western world, really, not just UK and New Zealand. Does that strike you as strange, or do you think there's some kind of wider agenda going on?
Well, I think it's part of the culture, the Western culture, which, it has been a race to the bottom, as I say, for Canada, the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand. And it seems that we've all been in a race to reject the Judeo-Christian values that have underpinned a lot of our societies. And so therefore we've looked at decriminalising prostitution. We've wanted to promote, killing children in the womb, and we want to promote killing elderly and vulnerable people at the end of their life through euthanasia. There's also obviously the whole LGBT agenda, and then the confusion around whether we're male or female. And some things we are ahead of you. We have legalised euthanasia, and I know that there's a big battle happening in the UK on that. Canada are obviously further down the track on that. I think in terms of religious freedom, probably Australia and the UK aren't doing too well on that. But then again, we still have laws that would criminalise someone praying outside an abortion clinic. We've got conversion therapy laws, even though they couldn't produce any evidence that this horrific examples of conversion therapy were actually happening. And you did mention Jacinda Ardern. I mean, the interesting thing is that the rest of the world thinks that she was the greatest Prime Minister New Zealand has ever had, and yet her political staff fell probably the most rapid that I have seen of any political leader. And part of it was because during the lockdown for COVID, which was, totalitarian, just completely overboard. But at the same time as we were locking down and protecting the vulnerable from COVID, she was ramming through a law which decriminalized abortion and gave us one of the most extreme abortion laws in the world. Yeah. So the paradox was there for everyone to see, and then of course euthanasia. There was attempts to legalize cannabis for recreational use. We legalized same-sex marriage in 2013. So we've sort of led the way in some social engineering, but we're also, for example, I think Canada is well ahead of us on euthanasia. And I think, especially for the UK, as you consider euthanasia, if you want to see how bad it can get, look at Canada and look at what's starting to happen in New Zealand as the slippery slope is already starting to kick in, and they're trying to expand the law to more and more categories. Because once you categorize something as a human right, Tony, as we know, everybody has that human right. And how can you say, no, you're not allowed it, but others are?
On the one hand, you're absolutely right, Bob. You say, look, it's a slippery slope and a race to the bottom. I mean, we'll come on in a second, if that's okay, to the fact that we are a little bit ahead of you now, because turns out we know what a woman is. But we can talk about. Turns out our Prime Minister now knows what a woman is as well. And you're absolutely right. The race to the bottom, and it almost seems there's loads of different reasons why we're going the way we're going, and just undermining marriage and family more generally, which I would say this, wouldn't I? But more and more I see that as being right at the core of everything, because strong families don't need big governments, and big governments love power, and actually in order to exercise that power, they've just got to undermine so many of the aspects of the family that you were talking about. The whole smacking thing, we've had that recently in Wales, which is where I live in the UK, and again there are continual pressures in Westminster for that to happen. All sorts of things. We're nudging the whole idea of trying to reduce surreptitiously the age of consent by saying, well, actually, if it's somebody only just over 16, then it doesn't matter if the other person's just under 16 does it, and all sorts of little things like that. And the RSE agenda, which we'll come on to because it's a battle you're fighting at the moment, but all sorts of things. And I suppose the liberal argument is, well, if you live in a liberal democracy, you're trying to make everyone's life freer, and in doing that for ever smaller groups, you get to the point where in order for that tiny group to be able to live their version of free, everyone else has to change the evidence of their eyes and ears and all that sort of stuff. And I think there's been pushback in the UK. So our Supreme Court has just said, no, woman is biological, and that's having all sorts of repercussions, which we've only just begun to work through, really. But that's a battle you're having. And tell us about that battle, and also the fact that you've lost your charitable status. We were never set up as a charity because we saw that coming straight away. They would come for us. Although other charities in the UK lobby politically and get away with it, we knew we would never get away with it. So we're a not-profit company limited by guarantee. Tell us about your battle to identify a woman, and maybe wrap in your legal issues about losing your charitable status.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favourite statements is, before you take down a fence, figure out why it was put up in the first place. And of course, there's always been this kind of hedge of protection around young people, especially around the whole area of sex and what we expose young people to now for our relationship, sexuality education, RSE as well. We've had groups that have come in, extreme LGBT groups that want to basically sexualize young kids, tell them all explicit details about hedonistic sexual activity, confuse them about their gender. I mean, they are telling kids that they can choose from 120 plus genders and 200 plus sexualities. And then we wonder why our kids are stressed. And so there's been a lot of pushback. And part of the reason the pushback has come around, Tony, is because a lot of these agendas are sort of done in the dark. They're done undercover, and nobody sort of knows what's going on. That was one interesting thing about COVID, is that parents actually saw some of the work that was being sent home online and were observing what the kids were being told to read and what they were being indoctrinated in rather than educated. And that was a bit of a wake-up call. But with the RSE, we sort of dug deep into what kids were being exposed to, and parents were shocked. And it was from both sides of the aisle. It was liberal parents, it was conservative parents, it was people of all different faiths and no faiths. And I think I agree with you, Tony. I mean, we have a Christian DNA in our organisation, but we find that all of the issues we're tackling, we find that there is a cross-section, broad support for our stand of protecting children, promoting strong families, and promoting marriage. Now, in New Zealand, our marriage rate has just declined. You know, it's a massive drop to what it used to be in the 60s and 70s. And also our fertility rate. I mean, we're well below replacement rate. It's 2.1 is the replacement rate. We're at 1.66, I think it is, around there. So, you know, we're having to import, so to speak, population and immigration to keep our fertility rate up, because who's going to pay for, you know, retirees when they do retire? Who's going to pay the superannuation if we don't have workers? So unfortunately, we have cheapened marriage. We can't even define marriage now. We think it can be, you know, any gender. And of course, once you change the requirement around gender, then what stops you changing the requirement around number? And there's plenty of push in New Zealand for polygamy and polyamory. And of course, some of the immigrant groups coming in are pushing that as well. So it is a constant battle, but you just have to look at the data and the research to see that as marriage rates have decreased and as families, when they've formed, if they don't have that glue of marriage and committed relationship, then the data shows that they're much more likely to struggle with poverty, more likely to end up in prison, more likely for there to be child abuse. You know, the statistics are all negative. Now, because we spoke up on this, Tony, just to link into your final part of your question, we were registered as a charity. You can register if you're part of education and if it's deemed to be public good. Now, when we first registered, to talk about marriage and promote strong families was deemed to be the public benefit. The state organisation that looks after charities didn't like the fact that we were speaking up about marriage, that we were opposing abortion, opposing euthanasia, opposing legalising cannabis. And so they came after us. They wanted to deregister us and said we were too political, even though other charities like Greenpeace were plenty political and were breaking the law as well. We never did that. And after 10 years and getting all the way to the New Zealand Supreme Court, we were deregistered. We won in the Court of Appeal, but lost in the Supreme Court. And the reasoning was they said that promoting family and our version of marriage was not in the public benefit. That's the quote. But they did say that if you promoted human rights, which is the diversity, equity, and inclusion type human rights, you know, gender, sexuality, racial recognition type stuff, or if you promoted the environment, then that is charitable. So what we've done is we've pushed out the basically Judeo-Christian values of family and marriage, and we've welcomed in a new cultural religion of environmentalism and LGBT human rights. And so that's why we were deregistered. But look, the shackles are off. We're not restricted by what we have to say now. Our funding's gone up, so all good.
Yeah, well, there you go. There you go. And you're a very popular organisation. You're a very popular guy. You're all over the media, all over the place. I'm wondering, Bob, what your key challenges are down in New Zealand, or up in New Zealand from your perspective. What are your key challenges going forward the next year or so? What's on the horizon?
Well, we're still struggling to figure out what is a woman. And in fact, a bill was just introduced into Parliament this week to clarify that a woman is an adult human female and a man is an adult human male. I mean, you sort of have to laugh at it. It's kind of like, you know, have we really lost it that much that we have to have that? Yeah. But the problem is that, as you know, we had a New Zealand weightlifter who entered the girls' weightlifting section at the Commonwealth Games. Yeah. There's been plenty of examples of dudes wanting to play in women's sports, going into women's changing rooms, and just confusion around male and female women's refuge as well. And the guy that took over from Jacinda Ardern was asked, what is a woman? He said he probably needed to take advice, that the question was from left field, and it was what you identified as. Interestingly, Tony, just this week, he was asked again, because of this new bill that's just been put into Parliament. He's the leader of the opposition now, Chris Hipkins. He was asked again, well, you've had time to think about it. What is a woman? He said, oh, well, my answer is the same. It's anybody who identifies as a woman. So, if you've got a prostate and a penis and XY chromosome, then, hey, that doesn't matter. It's what you identify as. So we're sort of no further down the track when our political leaders are so spineless and weak-kneed. And, yeah, I mean, congratulations to your Prime Minister who finally figured it out, but he needed a Supreme Court to tell him what the answer was. I mean, if my message to families is if we can't trust politicians on basic biological reality, why would we trust them with any other issue? And that was the same with Jacinda Ardern. And
100% with you on that, Bob.
If she
100%.
can't understand that the unborn child in the womb is a human being, despite the fact she's a mother, then why would we trust them with any other decision?
Oh, so true. And we desperately need politicians, conviction politicians who will speak the truth from their heart. It's not just about power. It's not just about, I'll say whatever the focus groups tell me to say. I'm absolutely appalled at somebody who, one day will say, well, actually, it depends what a woman is. 99% of women don't have penises, and then to come out and say, oh, well, because the court has said, therefore, you just think exactly as you say, how can I trust you on absolutely anything when you've failed on the most obvious thing to mankind? And it kind of ties into this whole toxic masculinity kind of discussion. You have you have incels, these guys who just sit in their rooms and play computer games and watch porn, and then you have kind of they turn into monsters because you get toxic masculinity. But what we're missing is the next stage, which is heroes. People who are willing to stand up, speak the truth, be self-sacrificial in order of the defense of others weaker than them, and in order of the defense of society around them. And we need more of those people. Bob, you're one of those. And it's fantastic to talk to you. We're going to have to stay in touch because you're a brilliant guy. Your website's brilliant. You've got loads of great videos and all sorts of stuff. We'll put it up on the site. I'll encourage everyone to go across and look at that. But Bob, I just want to say, keep up the fantastic work.
Thanks. Good to be with you, Tony. Can I just leave you with a quote from Billy Graham, the famous preacher who said, when a brave man takes a stand, it stiffens the spines of others. And I've always thought that it's organisations like yours, Tony, and Family First and Christian Concern. I know in the UK, there's some Kiwis who work there. And it's when organisations and individuals take a stand that it stiffens the spines of others. And we just need to encourage and stiffen each other's spine. So thank you for your work as well.
That's kind. The best is yet to come.